Chapter 5, Part 2. And the teachers did nothing. They'd stand back and let me get thumped. That's horrid, Spike, Poppy replied. That's reality, he continued. The teachers don't want to get hurt. Back onto the path the gang walked. The deer park could be seen quite clearly at this point, as some warden had cut down several hearty trees that had once blocked out the view. The wind, without warning, turned fierce, almost knocking Kip off his feet. So to make their journey easier, the gang walked against the wire fence along the edge of the deer park, pulling their collars up and trying to shelter from the worst of the gusts, but it didn't make much of a difference. The geese too were being blown about, their feathers fluttering in the wind and making their usual noisy din as they headed towards the dam. The gang soon arrived at the first small bridge, the one that would take them over to the lower lake woodland and meadows. But first they had to go through the large wooden gate, obeying the "Please close the gate" sign. Being respectful of the country code, Jamie made sure that the long latch fell into its locking position. It groaned and clanked, as the gate had obviously not been oiled in ages. The rules and regulations kept the good kids at the mercy of the bullies, Spike continued. There was nothing you could do. The school bell would ring, and the teachers would get everyone outside into the playground. The teachers handed us over to suffer 15 minutes of torture. If the teachers had only let us stay indoors, it might have been safe. So I quickly learned that the way to avoid a beating was in defying the teachers, sneaking out of lessons and straying out of the school grounds into the safety of the shopping centre. That was our sanctuary. What Spike's saying is so true. It was like this in my school, said Sebastian. And mine, said Jamie. What about you, Kip? I was all right having a bigger brother in the upper school. He looked after me. I'd wait for him at the school gates and we'd walk home together. But after he died, some of the kids turned on me. Hop was clever when he was alive, though. He could talk his way out of anything, and if that failed, he'd run. He always said to me, "Don't try to fight. If you can run, run." These were just a few of Hop's accomplishments at school. He developed a great skill in navigating the bullies, and a much sought-after talent in hiding. You see, Hop had had enough problems at home with his father. "And what about you, Jamie?" asked Sarah. "I was bullied too," he said, "but more by the teachers than the kids." "My teachers never taught me anything, they only lied," said Kip. "It was all propaganda of sorts." Then Sebastian said, "There must have been one teacher that inspired you, Kip." "Jamie, you're here at university training to become a teacher yourself." "Yeah, there was one," Jamie admitted. "My biology teacher. He was cool, but most were cruel." Jamie, unknown to his new first-year friends, had suffered a mental breakdown during his second year. After his recovery, he had had the idea to set up a club to counsel all those at the college that had been bullied at school. During the first 2 weeks, he had gone on an obsessive campaign to get the students talking about the issue and to get the students to admit to their involvement in bullying or in their turning a blind eye to it and allowing it to continue. This all led to the setting up of a self-help group, which he called his Club for Damaged Souls. Brian and Jamie had set the club up as an alternative to the Hop and Max Society. Yes, there was a club which was formed by some third-year students a year earlier to tell each other stories about Hop and Max's adventures. The club soon became popular and grew to include students from all faculties. Jamie and Brian's club was, however, unfortunate in that it didn't attract the same attention that the society had. It would seem that students were not ready to admit that they had a damaged soul or that they were in need of any counselling, and the notoriety of the Hop and Max Society seemed much more appealing. Kip was now hanging behind. He had found a patch of red fungi amongst the brambles and was watching a solitary hornet circling on the bloody, sweaty skin. "Kip," Poppy called out. "Hurry up." Brian and Sarah then spoke to the gang about an obsession that was sweeping the college. A growing number of students are joining a new writers' club. It might interest you, Kip, Sarah explained. It was formed to study the writings of Maximilian. Yes, the Max. The Hopper Max Society had quickly grown in its popularity, you see. This, I think, led to the founding of the Writers' Club, Brian continued. Max naturally being chosen as patron saint after the discovery of hundreds of his poems and short stories. This was a revelation, something that Kip and the other new chicks knew nothing about, and something that the gang felt they needed to be aware of. You might think that there could be nothing more harmless than a group of undergraduates meeting to read and analyse the poetry and short stories of a murdered boy, but there was a darker and more sinister side to these meetings, Sarah explained. This was something Brian and Sarah were all too well aware of, and something they felt that the new chicks must avoid getting themselves involved in. For a while after Hopper Max were murdered, said Sarah, the college students, and many of the lecturers too, were naturally shocked and afraid. There were real fears that other students might fall into the murderer's hands. Even today, 9 years after, you see, the murderer still hasn't been caught. But what has happened recently, Brian continued, is the emergence of this new writers' society. I still don't get what's so wrong about a writers' society, Kip remarked. There's a lot wrong with the society, Sarah said. You mustn't get yourself mixed up with that lot. It's dangerous. But why? Kip asked. Because they're crazy, said Poppy. They're like some sort of cult. This is why we're telling you this, Kip, Brian interrupted. You may be approached by members of this society, and they will want you to join them. But why me? Because the Max Writers Circle will already know everything about you. You can't think that they won't have had members following you, can you? But I've only been here a few days. Yes, and in that time you've caused quite a stir, Poppy said. I guess, said Kit. So there's a society set up in honour of Max and my brother. But I think this is brilliant. It's not, Sarah insisted. Like I said, they're dangerous, Kip. You must stay away from them. But why? What harm are they doing reading poems? Sarah attended one of their meetings, Kip, said Brian, and she found it all very disturbing. But how? I really don't understand what the problem is. Listen, Kip, said Brian. For your own sanity and safety, don't get involved with these people. You see, what started out as a small group of students reading Max's poems and stories has grown into something unsavoury, spreading fear and indoctrination amongst the campus, especially targeting the new chicks. Don't be silly. Why? He asked. What are they doing that's so bad? It started when some of the students at this college began to interpret their writings as a doctrine for political and societal change, Sarah continued. Again, there was nothing wrong with this at first, just as there's nothing alarming about students reading and discussing Marx or Hume, but something else has been happening. It's as if the writings have some kind of supernatural hold over the society's members. They began to interpret Max's words figuratively. They began preaching these ideas to small groups, but recently they'd taken to more direct action, and some people have got hurt. What do you mean? Beaten up, Kip, Brian growled. Kip stood there, not knowing whether to laugh, trying not to smirk. It might sound ridiculous, said Brian, but Max's poetry is now being read as a religious text. That's a bit silly, Kip answered. I don't believe it. I can't believe that intelligent students would go along with this. That's what we all thought, said Poppy. I mean, what could be more harmless than poetry readings? But it has led to indoctrination and terrible bullying amongst what the society leaders have started to call the neophytes. Neophytes? Kip asked, looking puzzled. The new believers, said Sarah. They have to go through some sort of apprenticeship. What, to be allowed to read my brother and Max's poetry? Max's poetry, Kip. Max's poems, Kip scowled. But my brother was the poet. He was the clever one. Unknown to Kip, Max's posthumous fame as poet and artist had eclipsed that of Hop's. The boys' poetic and artistic notoriety while they were alive and active during the college poetry slams and their other public readings and exhibitions was now lost in legend and mythology. The murders of the boys had been the talk of the college for many years now, each new batch of freshers adding to the stories with new embellishments and alternative truths. Each new term brought with it new stories, separating fact from fiction. It was indeed becoming more difficult with each new term to see through the myths and legends. The boys' fame and cult status was further elevated due to the exhibition that was put on back in the January of '92 by the infamous Catherine Brooks. This was 4 years after they were murdered, and as many still believe, by the curator herself. The Writers' Society started shortly after the Hop and Max exhibition, said Jamie. The college had wanted to honour the boys' work, so they asked Catherine to put together an exhibition. I think the college believed that she knew the boys best. We all saw it. We all saw the power that Max had when we looked at Hop's photographs of him, said Poppy. Then there were those gatherings of girls that started to meet and talk about Max and his ideas, Brian interrupted. It spread as guys joined the group to debate the ideas found within Max's writings. Yes, Jamie continued. Everyone at that point was talking about secret meetings and prophecies. There was this huge poster as you entered the exhibition of Maximilian naked in the Camellia House, said Sarah. Yes, Kit replied. I know about this. Hop wrote about the day he took the photograph in his diary. Well, said Brian, we blamed that picture for the formation of the society. Really, said Stella, starting to feel bored and irritable. It must have been a terribly good photo. Whether the photo was good or not, said Jamie, it had a bewitching hold on whoever gazed at it for long enough. It was the effect of that picture that had some students believe that Max was something other than just a good-looking guy. That's true, said Stella. He was more than beautiful. Max was so gorgeous that just looking at the photograph made you want to go back to your room and cry your eyes out. So I can understand why his work has attracted a bit of a cult following. This was all too true. The cult status of the boys had been further elaborated with stories of Max's intrinsic beauty and sexual prowess. There are many tales of his super strength and skill on the football pitch, stories about how he was the kindest and most polite boy on campus, and how all the girls wanted to date him. After death, truth and reality gets distorted by time. Like myths and legends created out of history, the truth gets lost amongst the longing for make-believe and escapism. Hop was, to be candid, the more creative and controversial of the pair. His readings and performances had always attracted a dedicated crowd, and although most of his work was deemed too bizarre and eccentric, he was admired for his audacity and experimentation of language. His artwork and photography was also of an exceptional standard, and had several of the lecturers expecting great success and fame from the young artist in the near future. But the boys were also ingenious at hiding their true character and intentions, except from each other naturally, although Hop did have one secret that he had kept from Max. It was a secret that Max would not live to find out about. This was about the secret rabbit carvings Hop had hidden around the lakes. End of chapter 5, part 2.